we're all here together, joined by our care for education. It's necessary to reach all the sustainable development goals, and it's a systematic and sustainable way to achieve, well, gender equality, long-term economic growth, fighting hunger and climate change, and so forth. But I was curious to know, why is education important to you personally? And Anne, if we can begin with you, I would.
Sure. Thank you, Martina. Well, first of all, every individual on the earth is born with dreams and hopes for the future. And to fulfill each individual's full potential, we need knowledge, we need to grow as individuals. So, you know, for every human being to reach its full potential, education is so important.
Education is important to me because my parents fled for many reasons, but mainly because my parents fled a war-torn Somalia in the hopes that their children would flourish in every aspect of the word, but mostly in education. A privilege they were robbed of. Growing up and seeing my family members in Somalia, I was not a stranger to the privilege of being educated and how it's changed the trajectory of my life. I've not been displaced or unable to attend school because of factors outside of my control. Instead, I have finished school and have a bachelor's and a master's in public policy, but most importantly, and my favorite part, in a position to advocate and speak up as a youth leader for education.
Education is important to me personally because without an education, I would have been married off as a child. Before the first school was established in my community, I was booked for marriage, and then the school was built and I was enrolled in that school, and I was really able to enjoy my childhood, and that school changed my life and the lives of every girl in my community.
A report was published by UNESCO called The New Social Contract, and following that again, we ended up with what is now called Transforming Education Summit. So I was wondering, ahead of this summit that, you know, where we're getting together to see how can we ensure education in the future, what do you think is necessary in order to make this vision a reality? And I would actually love to hear from Selina first on this one.
Transforming education for me would mean that education is made totally accessible to every child, so that every boy and every girl around the world can access a quality education. And this can be done by addressing various barriers that stand in the way for these kids to access an education, be it child marriage, like the harmful cultures, be it the impacts from climate change, or any other barriers that stand in their way, because I totally believe that every child deserves an opportunity to get an education.
We know that poverty has increased with the crisis that the world has been through. The pandemic put a lot of children out of school, and we will not reach the SDGs unless we get all these children outside that are currently suffering from crisis into school. But then we also have to focus on the quality of the education, making sure that when kids go to school, when girls go to school, they actually, you know, they get that input to actually transform themselves and transform the world around them.
How can we ensure education to support lower income countries is not forgotten in the face of so many global challenges?
Well, there are many things we can do. First of all, we need to get the world's attention. And the Secretary General's Transforming Education Summit is one way of doing that. Put this on the top of the agenda of the world's leaders and actually telling the world that things are going in the wrong direction. GP, of course, is one example of how we can direct financing money to the low-income countries, because the world has promised themselves to leave no one behind in the job for reaching the SDGs. That means we have to have a specific focus on the low-income country, and GPE is definitely delivering on exactly that. Aisha, what do you see as the main obstacles to reaching the SDG 4 and all the other SDGs?
I see many key obstacles to reaching SDG 4 and other SDGs, but one very, very personal and very much present is the food security crisis in East Africa that's been exacerbated by the war in Ukraine and by climate. So what's that got to do with education? Everything. It has meant many girls in Somalia can no longer go to school as they need to help their families. In more extreme cases where families are struggling for survival, girls are being married off very young so that their dowries can be used to support the family.
Families are resorting to marrying off girls because there is a lot of economic pressures in families. And also children are going to school hungry and they cannot be able to learn and concentrate while they're in school hungry. The other day I was on phone with a teacher from my local school, and he was telling me children are complaining of headache, and it's not that they're sick, but they're hungry. They're hungry to a point where they are feeling headache. And I think people do not really understand that education is in crisis, and I think it's so important for world leaders to understand how education can help to mitigate these challenges. For example, climate change and conflict. And also these crises are also impacting so negatively on education. But I really wish that education can be prioritized and education can be given a priority, because from all these obstacles that are making us not achieve SDG 4, it's making so many children lag behind even more, and they are not accessing education.
We have to get people to understand that these goals are all interconnected. I don't think we can solve the climate crisis unless we focus on education, but climate is also, undermining the possibilities for girls and boys in marginalized communities to get education. So this is all interconnected, and that is why it's so important that you tell these stories. Thank you.
In my culture, girls are viewed as property. So at that time, girls' education was not a priority. So through external financing, a school was built, and that's how we were able to go to school. We can ensure a fully funded GPE, because I'm aware GPE works in more than 90 countries and regions. And with their track of work and the way they have been working with governments, I feel like they can help the local governments to transform or improve the education outcomes and improve the education systems. So even ensuring that GPE is fully funded, really, it goes a long way to helping these countries, because Kenya is a partner of GPE, and we have a lot of projects going on in Kenya and that are funded by GPE and other external financiers. So I feel like focusing on external financing really goes down to helping these countries that need the most this support.
Why do you think Norway or GPE is an important partner to Norway in all of this?
We're very proud of what GPE has accomplished, especially on mobilizing financing. And as I said, Norway was on board from the beginning in 2002, and we have been, and we continue to be one of the top contributors to the fund. And what I especially am proud of to see that GP has focused on is girls' education. It really has been able to put girls' right to education on top of the agenda. And another thing that I think is really important is that, one thing is to mobilize international financing, but in the future, each country must be able to finance its own schooling system, for the education, the global education to be sustainable. Each nation, each government must be in charge and be able to finance a good quality, accessible education system for all. And the GP is also working and pushing that that agenda for national governments all over the world, and that's really important.
What are Norway's priorities on education, and how will they help to achieve your broader goals? Because I know you're passionate about climate, nutrition, and health. So what are Norway's priorities on education, and how will they help achieve your broader goals?
Thank you, Celine. That's a great question. We have talked a lot about the crisis putting children out of school, and Norway is committed to global education and especially to girls' education, to keep pushing that agenda. Also, we need to step up on education during crisis, making sure that, whether it be the climate crisis and extreme weather events, people fleeing, all these crises happening that put children out of school, whether it be conflict, there are such a perfect storm of crisis, and we need to make sure that we have a system in place where also children that are fleeing or that are in the middle of food security crisis, climate crisis, that they still get to go to school. And we think we need to think in a new way to make sure that the school system is still accessible for children in the midst of crisis. Also, I think that school meals is one small but very important part of the education system, because it makes sure that also vulnerable children in the midst of a food security crisis will get food in their stomach, and that will also help them and help their parents see the necessity of sending them to schools. How do you think that education would help to achieve Norway's broader goals?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you. Well, and why I am passionate about education roots down to how I see that investing in education basically just means creating more resources and more people to solve the challenges of tomorrow.
What is your ask of global leaders, including Norway, ahead of the Transforming Education Summit?
My ask of global leaders, including Norway, comes in three parts. The first, for ministers and global leaders like yourself, Anna, to have more conversations with the young people, for young people. My second point is that the need to protect and increase donor aid to education. I've heard you speak about the genius that the SDGs are, but in practice, we're so far from achieving them, particularly by 2030. We're nowhere near it. We need to for a fully funded GPE to at least start working towards achieving SDG 4, and the role for GPE and the need for a systems approach to not just put a band-aid or a sticker on these issues and these crises, but to actually allow young people and communities to kind of withstand these crises, and that education is not just another list on the things that ends up being knocked off the list, as we've all discussed, but they're able to continue through education and with their education in the midst of crises that are about to happen, in pandemics, so on and so forth. Those are my points for leaders.
My ask for global leaders: first, I would like them to know that education is an investment and not an expense. It's an investment that is made to children, and in many years to come, that investment will come back to the communities, and it will trickle down to their families, to their parents, to their siblings. And because, for example, education was an investment made to me in my community 10 years ago. Through transforming education systems, we were able to produce children who are skilled. Right now in my village, we have nurses, we have teachers, we have business people, biochemists, And all these children, all these young people who are empowered and skilled right now, they're able to solve world's greatest problems. I would also like world leaders to focus on education, because education can help accelerate other SDGs. Without an education, it will be very difficult for us to achieve all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, world leaders should commit to protect and increase financing on education, because we need the resources to transform the education systems. Thank you.
I know it's difficult. I know that politics are complicated, and right now it can't be easy, distributing all these resources with everything going on. But education is so vital. As Selina has mentioned, to girls, for preventing, child marriages, ensuring that we reach equality and the other sustainable development goals, getting rid of poverty again, and so forth. So I guess what I'll be asking of leaders is that please also show with your actions, and not only with your words, that you really understand the importance of education.
I will take your strong messages with me to the TES and when I meet my colleagues around the world. And please continue to shout out and be so vocal in the importance of education. You're doing a great job. I would like to say that education is an individual human right for every child. And it's also key to reduce poverty and ensure gender equality.
For me, education is totally life-changing.
Education is transformative.
Education is underestimated. Last summer, GP had this campaign of raising your hand for education. I was wondering, can we round this whole talk off by actually raising our hand for education? So it's very easy. We all learned it in primary school, but yeah, yes, we do this.